Welcome to Glass in Session. I'm your host, Val. Thank you for joining me. And welcome to 2025. Sure, why not? Bubbles? Yes, please. This season, we're embarking on a little cruise around wine regions known for their nearby lakes. We'll explore lake effects, temperature moderation, and what makes wines from these areas so special, styles, and all that good stuff. And you know I like to start with geography and history, so let's pop this cork. Finger Lakes! We're in New York, and what is considered the U.S.'s biggest wine region. The Finger Lakes are located in west central or upstate New York, about a 5-hour or so drive from New York City. They are comprised of 11 glacial lakes, oriented north to south between the cities of Syracuse and Geneseo. If you look at a map, you can also see that they are pretty close to Canada. They range from between 6 and 40 miles long and can be up to 3.5 miles wide. We might as well go all the way back in time to the Cenozoic era, post-dinosaurs, circa, somewhere between 2.6 million and 10,000 years ago during the last ice age, as this is the most recent major geology-changing event for New York. Remember, I said the Finger Lakes were glacial lakes, i.e. formed by, you guessed it, glaciers. They pretty much carved into the Earth's crust, melted, and hello lakes. It looks like a giant claw just raked the Earth south of Lake Ontario. Some of these claw marks are up to 618 feet deep. Kind of oversimplified, I know, but now that we have the lakes, where are the grapes? Because that's really what we're here for. Well, we had hybrid grapes that I talked about back in season 13 when I covered American wines such as the Catawba and the Isabella. Because when the settlers came, the European vines, they just weren't working out. This whole Vitis vinifera thing on American soil. So the hybrids, crosses between the European and American vine species, yielded our first wine grapes. For the Finger Lakes, that would be 1829, courtesy of Reverend William Bostwick. Not only did he plant the first Catawba vineyards, for eating and for Sacramento wines, don't you know, but his winery was the first commercial winery established in the Finger Lakes in 1836. That winery didn't last long, but the Pleasant Valley, this is Pleasant Valley right here, but the Pleasant Valley Wine Company, a.k.a. Great Western Wine Company, a.k.a. U.S. Bonded Winery number 1, picked up the baton in 1860 and ran with it for the next couple of decades, passing it to the Taylor Wine Company, still rocking those Catawba grapes, which they ran with for over a century when they would eventually purchase the aforementioned Pleasant Valley, a.k.a. Great Western Wine Company. This series of events, ladies and gentlemen, is what put the Finger Lakes, more specifically the Keuka Lake, on the wine map. By 1900, there would be around 50 or so wineries and about 20,000 acres of vines, but then that dastardly plague of prohibition. So it would be another half decade or so later when the Keuka Lake endeavor in producing wine from European grapes would advance, not only Keuka Lake standing in the wine industry, but Seneca and Cayuga Lakes as well. These are the main 3 lakes that we think about when talking Finger Lakes wine. And we can thank Charles Fournier from France and Constantin Frank from what was then the USSR from getting this 20th century party started. Now there are about 150 wineries and over 400 growers around these lakes, with Riesling leading the charge as vinifera varieties grow. But I've had some awesome Cab Franc and Gewürztraminer from this region. And right here, I have a sparkling wine, and wouldn't you know it, that FingerLakes.com is telling me that Finger Lakes is home to some of the most spectacular sparkling wine production outside France's Champagne region, end quote. I also linked up an article on the stellar classic-produced sparkling wines from New York. I'll certainly drink to that. But let's learn a little more about the AVA, or American Viticulture Area, and the lakes themselves. As of 2024, there are around 11,000 acres of vineyards in the Finger Lakes. What makes the Finger Lakes unique? It's considered cool continental climate, hence the Riesling, a notable cool climate grape. The landscape formed by glacier scouring and melting has left behind some well-draining slopes, often with excellent sun exposure and prime soils on the land. And don't forget that heat sink situation in the lakes. What do I mean by this? The warmer water temperatures are key to the temperature moderation of the surrounding vineyards. As in other cooler, lake-adjacent wine regions, which we'll explore this season, you'll see how this is important to the cooler growing area, as the Seneca and Cayuga lakes rarely freeze over. I'm reminded of storage heaters I endured in England in my first cottage when I lived over there. The way they work is they store up heat overnight and release the warmth throughout the day, gradually. Only with the lakes, it's kind of the other way around. Heat is stored during the day, warmth is radiating at night, which I could not program my heaters to do over 35 years ago, so I'd have been better off living by a lake instead of that moldy-ass Brackley cottage. But I digress. Although the climate is considered continental with hot summers and cold winters here, the actual growing season is well moderated, not just by the Finger Lakes, but also the Great Lakes to the north and west of the region. These lake effects are also integral to extending the growing season just a little bit. This is what we mean by lake effects and why it can determine what kind of grapes can grow here. Keep in mind that as climate change becomes a harsh reality, extreme weather events are starting to counter the benefits of lake effects, and a mean late frost after an early bud break can be devastating to vinifera vines. As for the official wine regions, there are three AVAs. The Finger Lakes AVA, established in 1982, covers the vineyards around 4 of the 11 Finger Lakes, Keuka, Seneca, and Cayuga, and the Canandaigua. It's the main AVA, the Finger Lakes AVA. 2 of these lakes, Cayuga and Seneca, actually have earned their own AVAs as well. Seneca, translated from Native American as place of stone, like my heart. Seneca Lake is the largest and the deepest. It never really freezes over, unlike my heart. The AVA was established in 2003, and there are currently nearly 4,000 acres of vineyards. Riesling is the local rock star here. Get it? Rock star, place of stone. Haha. But the Cabernet Franc and the Pinot do well here for the reds, as well as the Gewürztraminer and the Chardonnay for the whites. Cayuga Lakes AVA was established in 1988, and according to CayugaWineTrail.com, is America's first organized wine trail, established almost 40 years ago. The lake, Cayuga, translated from the Native American boat landing, is itself 40 miles long. It is the longest of all the Finger Lakes, and mostly family-owned wineries take advantage of the slopes and heat sink provided by the lake. There are nearly 500 acres of vines and cool climate specialties of this area, including Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Pinot Gris, and Chardonnay, as well as Cabernet Franc. The other lakes in this region, Keuka and Canandaigua, translate to canoe landing and the chosen place, respectively, from their original Native American. And both lakes have their own wine trails as well, linked up in case you find yourself in need of some sipping around the region. What else is going on in the Finger Lakes? Well, let's have a little grape gab. In addition to all the Vitis vinifera I wrapped today in this, what the OCW, or Oxford Companion to Wine, calls the, quote, birthplace of New York's Vitis vinifera revolution, end quote, let's go back to this region's wine grape roots. Local varieties, aka Vitis labrusca. Remember the Catawba, certainly an American original, although whether pure Labrusca or perhaps a Labrusca cross is still TBD. Now, Labrusca offspring include the Niagara, which I have planted in my backyard, and the Black Concord grape. Here are some fun facts to add to this little gab of grape geekery. Let's start with the Concord, which to me is the reference for all things grapey. It, however, was developed in 1849 in Concord, see what they did there, Concord, Massachusetts. But if you'd like to call it by any other name, Wine Grapes has offered us everything from Firmin Noir to Bergerac to Bull's Seedling. Sorry. 5 years later, Mr. Ephraim Wales Bull, hence Bull's Seedling, he won first place for this grape at Boston's Horticultural Society's exhibition. And then some dude in 1869 pasteurized some of this Concord juice. He went to his church and said, hey, peep this communion wine. That dude's name? Dr. Thomas Bromwell Welch. Hey, that very Welch. Yep. Not the best for making wine, but some folks are having success with it. And I want to know, because just as I was learning about these whilst piecing together these episodes, how was I in the Finger Lakes for nearly 4 days and didn't have one of these famous grape pies? I have just perfected my all-butter pie crust, so I may just buy up some Concord or Bergerac grapes and pie up. Bull's Seedling pie. Speaking of the Concord, in 1866, Messieurs Claudius Hogue and Wheaton Clark crossed a Cassidy, a white Labrusca with Bull's Seedling, a.k.a. Concord, and poof, in Niagara County, New York, the Niagara grape, or Niagara is how it's spelled, but we always say Niagara grape, was brought into fruition, into its fruit own, or its own fruit. Niagara is, according to the Finger Lakes Wine Society, United States' leading variety of grape. All kinds of adjectives have been used over the centuries to describe this grape, from foxy to oily to grapey. And Wine Grapes, simply put, says it is the foxiest American hybrid of them all. And all I can think about is that scene from Wayne's World with Garth, Foxy Wine Grape. Even the original petition for the AVA mentioned the cultivation of Labrusca in addition to the vinifera and French hybrid grapes. On to these. I've had some excellent Traminette from this area, but just like in neighboring Canada, you can find Sauvignon Blanc, Vidal Blanc, but there is a Finger Lake specialty called Cayuga. Yep, like the lake. It was developed by Cornell University in the 1950s just for this area, as it's cold hardy and high yielding, and it's a cross between the Cheval Blanc and the Skylar hybrid, which is a Tribidag or Zinfandel hybrid we talked about in the Croatia episode, crossed with an Ontario hybrid, which is a cross of a cross, and we'll just stop there. Its release was in 1972 under its synonym, Cayuga White. These make nice sparkling wines, but also light-bodied aromatic wines similar to Riesling and Muscat. But Wine Grapes warns us against letting them ripen for too long, or you end up with foxy-ass wines. Well, they don't say foxy-ass wines, but I do. Fun, right? Lots of other hybrids grown here and well worth experimenting with, and lots of things to taste in this beautiful part of New York if you haven't explored this region or its wines. Lots to do there, too. Hiking, camping, water sports, shopping, B&Bs, and oh yeah, wine tasting and wine experiences. This is not an ad. I just found it an extremely cool place that I would love to go back to someday and just vacation. Finally, speaking of experiences, I hope you enjoyed this quest from giant glacial claw marks dragged across the Earth's crust to grape pie made from bull seedling or Concord grapes. Every time I put one of these episodes together for you, I know I learned something new, even if it's not specifically about wine. It could be history, it could be geology, it could be culture. But I hope that's what you get out of it too, if that's your reason for listening, because wine and culture and all these things are so tightly interwoven. That's the reason I really love wine. It's not just a beverage for me. So if you're just clicking play to be entertained because who knows what silliness I'm going to infuse into a booze podcast, I hope you were sufficiently amused and informed as well. Either way, I love knowing you are getting something out of this, and that's what brings me to the mic and keeps me off the streets, so to speak. I thank you for clicking play, and I value this precious spot in your download feed. You can also reach out to me via email, val@glassandsession.com or val@vinowithval.com. On the socials, pick your poison, Blue Sky, Glass and Session. I'm on Threads, Vino with Val, same as Instagram. On Spoutable, Glass and Session. Vino with Val on Pinterest, Facebook/Glass and Session. There is Glass and Session, and even, yes, podcast swag with pictures of my Nebelung Smokey, who helps me do these episodes, in my TeePublic store linked way at the bottom of the show notes and on my website. This week, I'm not reading ads for sneakers or meal kits or some kind of wickedly scented body butter, so get yourself some swag. It's a small way to support the Winecast. I've got my new Dry January Dry Dirty Martini t-shirts out there. The tri-blend tees are my favorite in terms of softness and fit, but do size up 1 or 2 sizes. And for those of you scoring yourself some swag, thank you so much for your support. There are always sales on the site, so keep a lookout for those too. Glass and Session is a production and registered trademark of Vino With Val, LLC. Music is Write Your Story by Joy Stock. Website is glassandsession.com/podcast.